All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about the different ways that you can solve quadratics and how to know what method to use based on the different quadratics that you are given. So we're going to look at four different quadratics and we're going to go through what we call a thinking map to help us decide, okay, how should I go about solving this quadratic? So first of all, I'm going to show you the thinking map. So here's the thinking map. Um, and as you can see, basically it goes about what you want to look for and how you could solve these different problems. So you always want to start here. So you always want to start at is there an x to the first power in your equation? And from there, this map is going to lead you to the different things to look for and how you can solve. So if you notice, our different ways to solve are all here. So we've got solve by taking a square root. We've got factor or use GCF. Factor by using GCF. We have specifically solve by factoring. And we also have, the solve by completing the square. And then last but not least, we have using the quadratic formula. So there are 5 ways that we have learned to solve. We have learned to solve different quadratics using all 5 of those options. So now we're going to kind of show how we know what to use when. So our first example that we're going to look at is the following. We're going to look at how we should solve 2x squared plus 1 equals 39. So we've got this following quadratic. We know it's a quadratic because the highest exponent is a 2. And we want to solve it. So we've got 2x squared plus 1 equals 39. So if we look at our thinking map, if I go back to that, first thing to look for is there an x to the first power in our equation? Well, if we look, there is not. So we want to look at what happens when it says no. Well, when it says no, that means for this first example, example 1, we're going to solve by taking the square root. So if I go back here, if I want to solve by taking the square root, I want to try to get this x squared alone. So the first thing I do is subtract 1 from both sides. So now we have 2x squared equals 38. Then I divide both sides by 2. Right? So when we do that, we get x squared equals 19. And last step is to take the square root, where we get x is plus and minus the square root of 19. You can't do anything with 19. That's a prime number. So that would be your answer. So that's kind of the idea here, is knowing how to solve these different problems. The next example we're going to look at is the following. So how will we go about solving a problem like x squared plus 6x equals 0? So if we look at our thinking map, we want to look, okay, is there an x to the first power in our equation? Yes, there is, right here. So there is an x to the first power, so we want to look at yes. Is it a binomial or a trinomial? So does it have 2 terms or 1 term? Well, if we look, we have 2 terms, x squared and x. So that's a binomial, so we want to look here. So that means for this problem, we're going to be factoring out a GCF. So the second example, we're going to factor out a GCF. So to do that, we need to figure out what our GCF. Well, the GCF in both of these is an x. So I'm going to pull out an x. Left hand side is x squared divided by x, which is x. 6x divided by x is 6 equals 0. Then we set both of these equal to 0. So here we're done. Here we have to subtract 6. So x is 0 and negative 6. So that's the second example where we used factoring out a GCF. And then here's the next one that we're going to look at. So the next example is the following. We have x squared minus 10x equals 8. So if we go to our thinking map, Is there an x to the third power? Well, if we look back, x to the first power, and we look back, yes, there is. We have this 10x. So we want to go to yes. Is it a binomial or a trinomial? So this one actually has 1, the x squared, negative 10x, and the h. So that's going to be a trinomial for us. Then it says, is x right here is our a1. So if we look back, a is 1. There's nothing in front of x squared. So we want to keep looking there. So we're going to go to yes. Then we want to see, can we factor the trinomial? So that's the next thing to try to look for. So if we look at this problem, in order to factor it, it's got to be equal to 0. So we would need it to look like this. So at this point, we would want to look for 2 factors of negative 8 that could add to a negative 10. Well, we have specifically negative 8 and 1. Those don't add up to negative 10. We've got negative 4 and 2. Those don't add up to negative 10. So we can't do this. We can't factor. So we want to say no. We cannot factor. So we're going to look here because we can't factor. Is b even? Yes, 10 is even. We're going to solve by completing the square then. So if we want to complete the square, right, this is where we take b, which is negative 10, divide by 2, negative 5, square it, and you get 25. So we add 25 to both sides. So you get x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 25 plus 8, which is 33. Then we factor, so we get x minus 5 squared equals 33. Take the square root of both sides, so you get x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 33. And then at this point, we cannot simplify the 33, so we just add 5 to both sides. So your answer is x equals plus or minus square root of 33 plus that 5. So we're done. And then very last example we're going to look at, I'm not going to actually solve this last one all the way out. I'm just going to talk through how you would do this one. But the last example we have is 6x squared plus 8x minus 10 equals 0. So if I look at my thinking map, is there an x to the first power? On this problem, yes, there is. There's that 8x, so I'd look at yes. Binomial or trinomial? Well, if we look, we got 6x squared, 8x minus 10. That's 3 terms. It's a trinomial. Does a equal 1? In this problem, a is 6, so it does not equal 1. So we want to look at no, and that leaves us to the quadratic formula. So that's what we're going to use now. We're going to use the quadratic formula for this last problem. Now, that doesn't mean you can't try to factor. You could try to factor, but that just might not be the most efficient way with problems like this. What I would do again is I would use quadratic formula here, which is, the following. B plus negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug everything in and then solve. So that's all for today. Today wasn't meant to be really a super long video. This thinking map here will be on Canvas for you, so you can print it out, copy it down, whatever you want to do. I'll have that for you. And then you're going to have a little Canvas check to kind of go through what we talked about today. And that's all we have. So have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.